the 230 cam made more power than and cam combined.
Hey everybody, this is Ty Peak with Brown Tilley Racing.
This is James at Brown Tilley Racing.
I want to talk to you about Gen 5 cams. As far as the 220 cam, it's really it's underrated. That's the word I'm looking for. That's an underrated camshaft. It gets passed over a lot, and I think that people are in this traditional mentality that you need this massive cam, you need a big cam, and a 220 is a relatively small cam.
Dyno results, and, we compared it to some of our competitors' larger cams because I don't think the competitors had one specifically roughly the size of the 220, but wanted to compare it anyway because we had the data. So the 220 cam like smokes them all up to 5,500 RPM, and up top it's within 4 horsepower, I think it was, between both of them.
The trade-off really isn't worth it, honestly.
Yeah, a little bit of tech info on this. The 220 cam, a lot of guys reference the 50 thousandths duration on a camshaft. Well, think about how that measurement is done. It's literally the duration of lobe lift. So it's not taking into account that this has a 1/8 rocker. So if you were to compare the actual valve motion or valve lift at 50 thousandths lift, comparable to like an LS cam, which is a 1/7 rocker, this 220 cam would actually be 2 or 3 degrees bigger in size and how it actually acts. Now that's not a lot, but part of our testing with the size of these cams, this 220 cam, it acts like almost like up top anyway, a bigger 230 duration cam, that people are traditionally used to. Now that's not to say that it also has the negative effects of a larger cam, because it actually is a very nice driving cam. Depending on the tuner, sometimes you could even get by with a stock converter, in a truck or something. Yep. So, it's a very versatile cam that is, overlooked a lot. So,
and another thing to note too is when you're comparing this cam to the next step up, our 225 cam, we like to see this 220 cam in an application with stock heads that's maybe got an intake manifold or something like that. In that specific combination, without CNC ported heads or anything, any kind of trick parts like that, you don't see much of a difference between the 220 and 225. It's only when you add CNC ported heads or maybe a ported intake manifold or Trinity or a high ram or even an MSD that's been ported that you'll really see massive gains between the 220 and 225. So I feel like that 220 cam, even though it's relatively small, advertised, it's a very stout little cam.
Packs a lot of punch, for
Absolutely.
sure. And for you guys that are wanting to do daily drivers or, weekend warrior cars, stoplight to stoplight, that cam's probably going to perform better than a lot of the bigger cams just because of the mid-range torque. You're not sitting there at 6,000 plus RPM all the time. You have to get there first. So that 4,000, 4,500 RPM torque that cam makes better than the other competitor cams and some of our larger cams, really helps get that cam motivated and gets a car moving.
And peak horsepower is an awesome number to have, and it's great to say that my engine makes 650, 700 horsepower, whatever it is. But the reality of it is that you're going to spend more time in the mid-range than you are going to spend at peak, unless you're running this thing up and it's a full tilt type of application and you're just hanging it high RPM. Your engine's going to come up and it's going to see peak and it's going to shift and it's come back down to middle range. And you're going to spend a lot more time in middle range than you are going to spend at peak horsepower. So it's really important to just think about that when you're ordering a cam, when you're buying a cam and you're thinking, well, I might do this. And it's really, I think, very, very much so worth it to, have a little bit less cam. It's going to drive a lot better.
More average torque everywhere is always a plus on something you're going to drive a lot. And to expand on this too, the 220 cam, for you L83 guys, I know you don't want to fly cut your pistons, so we actually revamped another version of this 220 cam and made a 217 cam, and we literally made this fit a stock L83 That way you can still keep the same performance that this 220 cam has, and it fit without having to, fly cut pistons. I know that's voodoo. Some people don't really like the idea of fly cutting a piston. It's super easy if you do want to do that, but for you guys that don't want to have to deal with that hassle, we do have a 217 version out for the L83 guys that literally makes the same power.
And not to say that if you really wanted to, you could put that 217 in an LT1 car.
Yep.
But it's not really necessary. You can use that 220 cam. They're very, very similar in power and torque as far as the results they made, and we kind of shot for that to keep the LT3 guys from feeling a little bit left out, not leaving any kind of power on the table.
Right. Yep. Now, stepping up a little bit, to speak on the 225 and 230 cams, we've also developed these power packages around these 3 camshafts as well. Starting off, the 220 is in a 600 horse package. That's stock heads. Literally, it could be an MSD intake or a Trinity, and you're basically making 600 at the flywheel. Now, I will say that these power packages were designed around E85, and some of these trucks and cars obviously don't come flex fuel. Now, that is a cheap mod that all you Gen 5 guys should seriously think about and consider. Literally add a flex fuel sensor and have your tuner tune it for it, and the fuel system is perfectly capable already out of the gate. So you literally just have to add the sensor and have it tuned. Big gains, unlike the older LS stuff. You're talking 30 to 40 horsepower gains usually.
Yeah, the direct injection really it exacerbates a lot of mods that wouldn't really make much of a difference on like a LS engine, Gen 3, Gen 4 LS engine. That direct injection, it really makes E85 worth a lot more. It makes adding compression, so milling cylinder heads, or putting a piston with a larger dome, just increasing compression any way you can. They really respond well to that.
Yep, and it's usually a good mod to do, because most of the time, if you've got a stock vehicle, they've all got DOD lifters in them for the most part. So you got to pull the heads anyway. So while you have those things off, it's always a good idea, if nothing, just mill the heads. Now, obviously, you will need to check piston to valve clearance on that.
Yes.
And to go up from that, we have a 650 and a 700 horse package. The 650 package will use our 225 cam. It's also paired with a set of stock CNC ported heads. I think we carried GPIs and the GMPP heads. Also with an MSD or a Trinity style intake. You can run a high rim as well if you could get one. The 700 horse package uses our 230 cam, and it'll use a set of CID heads and obviously a MSD or Trinity intake with that. And it actually makes a little bit more than 700. That's a super popular package.
Absolutely.
We've actually chassis dynoed a few of those combos already that have broke well into the 600 wheel horsepower range, with literally that package. It's a stock bottom end, fly cut pistons, milled CID heads, 230 cam, and 8,000 RPM.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if there's anything to attest to this platform and how great it actually is, our dyno mule, the first dyno mule, the LT1 engine, was out of a 2019 Camaro. Car was brought in, pulled the engine right out, went straight onto the dyno. I think it had like maybe 30,000 miles on it.
Roughly.
Several thousand dyno pulls later, a broken crank, some other things that kind of went wrong with it. It was by no means a fresh engine when we were done with it. That engine came straight off the dyno. We put a set of head gaskets on it.
Yep.
Kind of sealed it back up and fixed up all the little leaky spots from doing all our cam swaps. Set everything back up, put it in the car, and we actually ran that car for 3/4 of a season last year.
Yeah.
And it was a very strong running car. We've actually got the engine back out, freshened it up, and really sealed this thing up tight. And we're hoping for some real good results this year.
Yep.
But there was no trick parts. There was no any kind of fancy voodoo black snake oil magic.
Yep.
It
It was literally a wore out LT1 that, you know, did really well. So,
and that actually made what, about 670 to the tire?
yeah, a little over 670 to the tire.
And that was through a 10-speed. With it being a 19, it was a 10-speed car.
Yep.
Standard SS rear end, and was it the stock wheels and tires, or did it have radials?
It had stock wheels and tires on it. Yep. It also had a Circle D lockup converter, so that was with the converter locked, which does help on a chassis dyno. And then I've got my personal car is kind of a similar iteration of the 700s. I would kind of call it something between the 650 and 700 horse package because it doesn't have CID heads, but it does have the BTR 230 cam. And that car made 630 to the tire. Now it is a stick shift, so it might be a little bit, more efficient on the driveline side of things. So, that's even a good, package for, you guys that might not have the money to spring for the CID heads right off the bat, but maybe want that 700 horse package eventually. You can mill your stock heads, throw that 230 cam in, and make some good power, and a future mod add those CID heads and then have the full potential.
Yep, yeah, and those CID heads, they've got a GPI port in them.
Yep.
So that is the cylinder head that will sell in that 700 horsepower package. You have your option for the Trinity, the 230 cam kit, and it's going to come with all your valve springs, everything associated to run that 700 horsepower package.
Yep.
The CID ported heads from GPI.
Yeah, basically a 230 cam spring kit. I'm sure we're missing something. There's a limiter in there for the VVT.
Yeah, that is something to note. Is this all these packages, they still run VVT?
Yep.
It's not a lot, but it is very important that you retain the VVT in all of these camshafts unless specified otherwise, which I don't think any of the NA cams.
Yeah, all the
VVT lockout.
all the new NA cams, the 220, 225, 230, and then even our truck series cams, the 203, the 210, 215 cams, which is basically your L83 stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, being the 217 cam. All those are designed around VVT, so do not lock those out. If you lock them out, you're actually going to sacrifice horsepower up top. Most of the larger ones are all designed around a 4 degree, which is 4 degrees cam angle. So 4 cam will give you 8 degrees at the crank, and that's also a little tech info to note. If you're tuning one of these cars with HP tuners with the stock ECU, the VVT retard that you see is actually cam degrees, it's not crank. So 4 degrees, in the tune is actually 8 degrees at the crank.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of you guys might be using, aftermarket EFI. I know Holly has their DI, Terminator X control stuff out, and take note that the VVT on that is actually crank degrees, so you'll want to set that up accordingly whenever you go to tune the thing.
You just want to do your due diligence and make sure that you're squeezing every last bit of available horsepower out of your project or your package as possible. We don't like to see these things out there, and we see a locked out cam. It's like, well, you're sacrificing so much, and some people are afraid of the VVT. They don't like it. I don't know, but it's just get comfortable with it because it makes power.
Well, we're gearheads too, and we want everybody that runs our stuff to have good experiences and make good power and go fast. I mean, that's the name of the game. Is you're not modding this thing to go slower. So might as well benefit as much as you can by using the correct components to maximize the combination. So our BTR 230 cam is within 1 degree intake duration. Is 229 cam and it's 231 cam, and the whole curve from the moment I went wide open throttle to roughly 7,800, 8,000 RPMs, the 230 cam made more power than cam combined.
On the Spintron stuff, we saw with competitors' cam was the worst cam that we had on the Spintron as far as closing bounce, and I'm surprised we didn't break anything.
Yeah.
We try to target around 6,000 to 8 thousandths closing bounce, and that's generally right after the close on the base circle of the cam. We target within. That usually happens probably 20 degrees.
Yeah, so, you know, if you have your trace of the cam lobe, you know, you have your closing ramp, and usually the bounce starts by closing deflection, because usually it's kind of a chain reaction of events, really, depending on the valve train. But, you know, opening deflection causes, you know, loft, and then the loft obviously misses the closing ramp, or the, you know, closing action of the lobe, and then it ends up crashing on the closing ramp, you know, close to the base circle, and it'll literally just bounce. So you know, closing bounce is literally what it is.
It's exactly what's happening. Is the stuff is bouncing in there, which is not good at all. With the cam, we saw 46 thousandths bounce, and that's a lot.
Yeah, and to kind of give you guys sort of an understanding, so you have a visual of what we're talking about, the Spintron has a laser that we've literally cut a window on the side of the block, and a laser shoots up at the face of the valve. So we're physically measuring the valve. So whenever we're saying bounce, it's literally the valve bouncing. So, you know, the valve is closing and it hits the seat and it literally bounces open and close again. And, you know, that's horrible for power. It's horrible for valve train stability. It's horrible for valve trains in general. And to add to that, the 46 thousandths bounce, what was that, around 7,400 if I it's going off memory here, so don't quote us, but we'll have a picture, you know, up.
Be right here.
Right here. You could see the same RPM increment on the dyno. It literally just fell off. And which is also ground by it was pretty awful too. We actually broke some components on the dyno running that cam. So we're actually trying to run it to at least 7,600 so we could get data at the higher RPM to see how much incremental, you know, change we had between our cams and their cams. And literally we couldn't get there because it was falling off so hard and pissed off. It was almost hitting like a mechanical rev limiter. And obviously we were running our valve tip saver on the dyno, and the bounce was so bad it actually bounced one of the lash caps off and broke it. That's basically a result of just out of control valve train. You know, if it breaks the lash cap, you know, what else is it doing to the rest of the valve train components too? So
can we put a link to the Spintron video that Brian did? Put it like right here where my finger is?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. I think that's it.
I think that's it. So we're gonna bleep out the names? I don't care.
Cap in two pieces, so you know, that's just get a
Standing
light
in the dark.
Yeah, standing in the dark.
Yeah, we call that a mollywhopping, and that's a technical term.